Welcome to another episode of Contruent True Talks, where we sit down with industry leaders to discuss innovations, challenges, and opportunities shaping the world of engineering, construction, and project controls. I'm Andy Verone, and I'm your host. And today, I'm really excited to be joined by Josh. Josh, welcome to True Talks.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'm excited to be here today.
I appreciate that. Josh, we have a global audience.
Right.
We reach people from all over the world. Why don't you spend a couple minutes and do a proper introduction of yourself
Yeah,
and where your career has taken you?
sure. No problem. Again, thanks for having me. Um, I'm Josh Maida. I'm the president of Samuel Engineering. We're a global engineering, procurement, fabrication, construction company focusing in the heavy industrial sectors. It's energy, utilities, mineral processing, renewable fuels, you name it. We were founded about 30 years ago by Claudia Samuel, and we've since grown to have offices around the entire country, and we've completed projects on every single continent except for Antarctica. So, um, myself, I'm an engineer by schooling, studied at the Colorado School of Mines here in Colorado. Um, Also have a executive MBA from University of Colorado, and I've obtained my professional engineering certification as well as my project manager professional. I'm in my 19th year at Samuel Engineering. But, I was drawn to engineering and problem solving from an early age. Like most engineers, I got the old cliche, I was good at math and science. My dad was a civil engineer growing up in the military, actually. But I always thought it was really cool when he would come home and he would lay out his full-size plans on the kitchen table, and he had all of his different colored pencils, and he's got rulers and drawing straight lines. And I would kind of sit there and he would explain to me what some of the stuff was. So yeah, I always had that mind from the beginning, and fast forward to today, still doing it, and I love what I'm doing.
That's awesome, Josh. What a great background and I had a similar experience with my dad and my grandfather being in construction their entire lives, and I always tell this story that my earliest memories are listening to them talking about being behind schedule, crews not showing up, materials not available on site, and I think that's what led me to this space as well,
Yeah,
trying to make a difference in it. So,
oh, very
Josh,
good.
have those projects taken you on travels to faraway places? Have you
Oh man,
traveled?
yeah. It's funny. I go around and friends and people say, "God, you must travel to great places." I travel a lot, but a lot of times the type of work we do is, in the middle of nowhere sometimes. So yeah, I've lived in Nome, Alaska. Got to see the Iditarod finish, building a mineral processing plant up there in the middle of winter. Um, a lot of travel through Texas, um, Wyoming, Middle America. We've done work in California. Done work in Turkey, so I've been over to Turkey as well. Been to South America. We do a lot of work in South America, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, you name it. So yeah, most corners of the world, and still looking for that job in Antarctica. Uh, and someday I want to do something in space. I want us to do a job in space. I don't know if I'll get a chance to go up there, but it'd be pretty cool.
Well, listen, there was a major milestone this week with SpaceX, so
Yeah,
that may not be too far away for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Josh, you and I picked a very aggressive topic.
sure.
We had a call a couple weeks back, and we're really going to focus today on strong leadership weathers any storm, and we're gonna start off by talking about bridging divisiveness
Hmm.
amongst teams and in the world we live in, probably most importantly. But Josh, when you think about complex projects, and you named a few as we did the introduction, conflict will happen, right? It's just the nature of the work that we do. Josh, what strategies do you use to turn conflict into collaboration?
That's a great question, and it reminds me of, one of my mentors a long time ago told me that bad news is not like wine. It doesn't get better with age. And, throughout my career, and I've read a lot of things, I've talked to a lot of folks, it's early and effective communication is really one of the best things to be able to deal with conflict, especially when you're dealing with a complex problem. You got to approach it with a partnership mentality, realizing that, an honest discussion about the issues that you're facing And having that honest discussion as early as possible allows everybody to just zero in on what the solution is, not be lost in what happened in the past or something else. And I think what I've seen in my career is too many times, the client and contractor relationship, if you will, gets marred with a purely transactional mindset. Everybody's just worried about the pennies and the contract and the legalese and things like that. And nobody really wins in the end when that's the case. At my company here, and for a long time, we've seen that it's really about the relationships. It's really about the people and building that trust between the client and the stakeholders and us who are providing the services. Because what we do transcends one project. Relationships transcend just one project. We've had so many projects that people just randomly call us out of the blue and say, "Hey, we heard from somebody you guys did a good job on a job for them a while back. We'd love to hire you to do something else." When we can create customers, clients that become unpaid marketers for us, that's the real goal. And that's based on, really hammering away at how to best approach the problem, especially on a complex one.
Oh, that's great. That's a great background on that. Josh, when you think about, building those teams, right? You're building those teams to work on those. You'll have young engineers entering the field alongside seasoned experts.
Yeah.
What have you learned about uniting those diverse perspectives into a cohesive team? And those perspectives, if you're talking about a young engineer coming out of college versus someone that's been, at Samuel for 20, 30, 40 years, what are some of those things that you've learned, and how do you bridge that?
Oh yeah, I mean this is near and dear to my heart because our industry, the EPC industry, it's really evolved over time. Companies are sending work overseas. Technology is changing faster. Especially for a lot of people who have been around the industry for a long time. The technology is changing faster than people can keep up with, and there's a younger generation that comes in that they have never lived without a cell phone in their hand, and so they know how to use that technology. And you have to figure out how to bridge that gap and invest in the future of your company, invest in the future of the industry. So the first thing we do when it comes to that is we hire for the right character and work ethic. If someone can fit that mold, we can get them working towards a common goal. You can take somebody who's been in the industry for 40 plus years and somebody who's been in for 4 days. And if they truly are passionate about what they're doing and problem solving and they have a good work ethic, you can get them together and generate that cohesion. It kind of naturally, organically happens. We call that the flywheel at Samuel. And you think about being nerdy engineers, you think about a flywheel, it takes a lot of momentum, a lot of force to get going. But once you get it going, it can run infinitely almost, as long as there's no friction, no force against the flywheel itself. And we like to use that concept, and we found that concept really helps to bridge that gap between the different generations in our industry.
That's fantastic perspective, and what a great analogy for sure. That's great, Josh. So kind of continue on the line of questions. How can leaders maintain that trust and alignment when uncertainty or external pressures threaten to pull those teams apart? Right? It may be. It may be a problem on the project that you're up against. It may be a customer that has different expectations, or it could be just what's happening in the world today. So how do you maintain that trust and alignment?
Oh man, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the golden rule: treat everybody like you want to be treated. Having respect for a fellow coworker, for a client, for somebody else, respecting their capabilities. Respecting where they're coming from, that, they have a boss who's pressuring them to do something as well. That's where that trust and alignment starts. If you can go into something with that mutual respect for someone, you've cleared a lot of the path to get through those tough times. There's author Brene Brown. Most people know who she is, a leadership author. She has a quote that I always remind myself of. It's clear is kind. And it's just the importance of clarity, and especially in leadership, making sure you're clear, you're explaining to people, why something is the way it is, and giving clear feedback, whether that feedback is constructive or positive. But being clear, especially in stressful times, is imperative, and over communicating that clarity in those times is really important. We've seen this really work through clear and decisive unity in our leadership team. COVID's an example of that. When we decided during COVID, we didn't lay a single person off during COVID as a company. As you can imagine, industries went down, projects went down. We made the decision to not lay people off because we are in this game for the long run. And, we want to maintain those people. But man, something like that, making a decision like that takes just ultimate clarity and communication amongst the team. So, we have a concept too, Jeff Bezos calls it disagree and commit. But basically, everybody gets a room, they're heard, they talk, they work it out, but everybody leaves with a commitment to what was decided in that room. There's no side discussions, nothing, no backstabbing, nothing like that. We've found that, that's really a concept that helps leadership teams stay unified.
Yeah, Josh, that's some incredible, lessons learned and insights that you have on that, which kind of leads me into culture. I think you've touched on this already,
Sure, yeah.
but if you think about, what role culture played in navigating the challenges. You just mentioned one that, is still fresh in our mind around how you got teams to stay together, but navigating challenges and driving success in your current role. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing today. I think that's so important.
Sure. Yeah, culture, it's the soul of a company, of an organization. It's like the guiding light, the North Star. You have to maintain it. Establishing that strong culture, especially in your leadership team, that's how you're going to get people to buy into the vision and the purpose of the company. And you got to have that when you're tackling those biggest challenges. We've been in business for nearly 30 years now. Our founders, they set a very rock solid culture for the company. And now, it's my job and the job of our leadership team to carry that forward into the next generation of the company. And we've always said, we want to maintain a culture that's so strong that those that don't buy into it, they leave on their own accord. And we've seen that. And it's interesting to see how, that's not saying those people are bad necessarily. There just might not be a fit. And we still have great relationships with a lot of those folks that have moved on. But, we want to maintain that culture. We want to be, walking the walk of what we're saying. And, you got to figure out what your core values are as a company and really believe in them and really stick to them. That's, at the end of the day, you're not going to have much of a culture if you don't stick to what you say you believe in.
Yeah, Josh, I think, I'll share just a little bit of my personal experience. So, right out of college, I joined a top 20 engineering company here in Pittsburgh, ranked by ENR. And after 25 years of being part of that engineering company, I was one of the young guys. Just imagine that, right? 25 years. There were people that I worked with were in their 40th year, 45th year. And I believe, and I think we probably would need a third input here from a different profession, but I believe in the engineering community that culture is so critical. I really felt part of a family. It was hard to leave too. To your point, I was ready for a change, and I think being in an engineering company around engineers and just incredibly talented and smart people really do help foster the culture. But at the same time, it's very competitive. That's one thing that you always want to work on the best and the challenging projects. So I think there's really great opportunity, really smart people, but at the same time there is competitiveness. I don't know. Do you see that at Samuel?
Oh, certainly. And I'll be honest, that's a good thing for a company. You always want to be raising the bar, right? And bringing people up to a level. One of our core values is excellence. The other is compassion. And a lot of people look at us kind of weird when we say that. They're like, well, how can you do both? You got to be excellent as a company, or you're not going to maintain. People are just going to leave. Clients are going to stop hiring you. But you also don't want to be one of those companies that just hires and fires, and people are spending their whole day looking for a new job and working on their resume because they think they're going to get fired. And so we really try to balance that, and that's been kind of a bit of secret sauce for us over 30 plus years.
That's fantastic. Josh, last one on culture, and it probably ties the first two segments together. So if you think about today's environment that we work and play in and live and raise our families, how do you balance as a leader project pressures deadlines, budgets, client demands,
Yeah.
while keeping people engaged and motivated. Like, how do you, that's different than it was 25 years ago, I can tell you personally. How do
Yeah.
you do it as a leader? What's some of your techniques?
It is, you're right. I mean, years ago, people just kind of felt that they had to, they were holding out for a pension or, some other reason. They kind of just had golden handcuffs so they couldn't leave. Now, I mean, we see it with, the different, people moving everywhere and, the migration and employment and, the younger generations, right? They come in with a different mindset than, 20 years ago. And, what we try to do is we try to just make sure we're committed to our employees. Again, I was talking about making sure, we want to drive excellence. We don't want people to, be apathetic, but we also don't want people so scared about their job that they're not focused on getting the work done. So we make that commitment. I mentioned about COVID, we make that commitment to employees. You know, they're going to stay engaged if they feel like they're part of a family, to your point, Andy, right? If they feel like they're part of something bigger than just themselves, they're part of something, they're helping out their coworker, they're helping the world with the type of solutions we're providing to keep the modern way of life, to keep the lights on, your iPhone charging when you plug it in. If you can really incentivize people and make sure they have a place that they come to every day that they're passionate about and they want to be part of a team, that really solves a lot of the challenge. Then for us, we try and have a pretty diverse type of work that we do. Part of that's the longevity game of the company. We want to be around for hundreds of years, and we know we have to evolve. But it also allows our employees to have some sort of, diversity in the type of work they do when they come in the morning. Whether that's traditional T&M type projects all the way to EPC lump sum projects. I mentioned we do work in a number of different industries around the world. It's kind of exciting. In 1 week, somebody could be filling out their timesheet and they can put down a job in, Africa and a job in South America and a job in Canada and a job in Virginia. It's kind of cool to be able to have that diversity. And we find that between that diversity and then, the job security that we offer people, that commitment to our employees is really what helps people work through difficult projects, because they all are.
Yeah, for sure. But now you said something that really just struck a nerve with me. I think for me that those projects that absolutely make a difference in people's lives, right? For me, if I think about my top three projects that I've ever worked on, um, and I am, kind of at the last phase of my career here.
Mhm.
But one was after Katrina had devastated the Gulf of Mexico. We had the opportunity to modernize floodplain mapping, and I think about that. Like we had better visibility, better insights into what happens if 100-year flood or a 200-year flood happens, and those will stick with me forever, throughout my career. The other one was had the opportunity to do a big retrofit on the Alaska pipeline. So
Oh, cool.
my firm originally in the 70s, obviously I was just a kid then, but they were the original design engineers for the Alaska pipeline. And in the late 80s, early 90s, we did a retrofit. Again, it was monumental project. And so to me, that's part of that culture. Do you want to be part of something, a road, bridge, highway, any type of facility? Right now, data centers, you think about how hot data centers. Do you want to be part of the largest data center in the world? I mean, I think that's part of being an engineer, and that's part of that desire to build and help people. Josh, really great insights on both those segments. Let's shift gears a bit.
Sure.
Man, engineering is evolving quickly. And by the way, technology has been in engineering as long as I can remember. I can remember using software to help on geometry and software to help with designing components of bridges. So I mean, it's not new to engineering. But let's park the technology for a minute. From your perspective, what's really hot right now when it comes to either technology, process, contract, or even just industry priorities? I mean, when you wake up, you woke up this morning, you're going to wake up, what do you think about? Like, what are the things that are just making a major difference for the engineering community?
It's funny. It feels like everything's hot right now. You get magazines and you get emails in, and Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, you name it, right? They've all got some sort of thing you should be focusing on as a leader. And you know, a lot of it's important information. You got to tune some of it out sometimes too, and really focus on what's most important for your industry. And for us, you know, we're at a critical juncture. You know, where clients, you know, they're demanding more governance in project contracting. You know, the days that we always tell our folks, the days of a blank check T&M project are done. Even if they call it a T&M project, it's not a. You have to have governance. You have to track, and we invest a lot in earned value management, integrated project control systems that really help our teams manage those projects and use that advanced technology. But you know, the advanced technology, you hear AI, you can't turn a corner without hearing about AI and how it's going to replace somebody's job. You know, it's quickly supplementing what we've always done. Now, I believe, and I've heard from a lot of people, you know, if you're not considering AI or machine learning in what you do as a company, somebody else is doing it, and they're probably going to get a leg up on you. Now, I don't believe that a computer is going to completely replace what I do or what my company does anytime in the near future. But we also can't have our head in the sand and just not pay attention to these technology advances because somebody's going to. You know, what we look at is how do we use some of these advanced technologies and some of the things that are changing around us to do more with the same team that we have. So back to the philosophy of our company, we're not going to lay people off because there's some new technology that can do something faster. We're going to hopefully be able to do more work and do the work that we're already doing more efficiently and with better quality and with better safety. You know, so that's one of the big ones. The second thing that we're really focused on that we see a lot of demand for is a modular execution mindset. And there's a lot of things out there. You know, we're doing a lot of if you look at like BIM dimensions, you know, plant 3D, you know, 3D modeling all the way through 4D, 5D, all the way up through 10D. We're doing a bit of that. That's starting to come into play more in our size of projects, the kind of mid-sized industry. And then we take it even further to where we have our own modular fabrication facility. You know, if we can look at these complex projects where we can take some of the risk of safety and quality and weather out of the field and do it in a controlled environment in the shop and send these complex modules out to the field, man, that's it's a solution that really works around a lot of challenges that we're seeing in the construction side of the industry as well.
Now, I love the modular side. It's something that I've been tracking for years, and as I always think about it, Josh, it's you become an assembler. You assemble versus construct, right? You're doing the hard work in a controlled environment, right?
Yep.
You're not being delayed by bad weather, and basically when it shows up on site, now you're assembling. And by the way, that's a completely different set of skills. I really, maybe on the next time we get together, next episode, we'll focus it on modular and those delivery types because I think they're making a huge difference. I think my view on the AI side, you know, just a good friend of mine and I caught up this morning for coffee, and we were talking about, imagine if AI gave you the opportunity, instead of having to validate your estimate or validate your schedule, you could say, here's my project plan, my schedule, my estimate, my cost breakdown structure. And AI could help validate and test that, or say, hey, by the way, there's a better way to forecast costs, a better methodology to use. I think that's what we're going to see before it's going to be replacing any of the humans. It's going to be that instead of having two estimators do the same job, the same work, it's one estimator then comparing it against the AI model. I think, you know, and listen, people are doing it today for sure.
Hey, listen, I think you're onto something there, man. You know, we do Monte Carlo analysis, different things like that. And, you know, we get into digital twins of plants that we do and modeling. But yeah, I mean, think about that, a digital twin from the project control side, you know, simulating a million different iterations of a project schedule and cost and what happens, you know, and figuring out what that most efficient point is for the project. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
For sure. Josh, any big changes on contracting types? Are you guys seeing, you know, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit, right? I mean, it's what are you seeing from your owners, from your ultimate customers? Are they focusing more on one type or other types of contracts that you haven't been familiar with?
Yeah, you know, like I said, I think a lot of them are driving towards more governance, transitioning more risk to the EPC. Now, an area that we've seen kind of start to perk up a little bit is the traditional days of EPC mentality where every T has to be crossed, every I dotted in the design package before you can really firm up a price. These projects don't really have that type of patience, if you will. You mentioned earlier data center. Man, I mean, they are moving at breakneck speed building these data centers and now looking to power data centers. I mean, you're talking 500 megawatts, gigawatts and greater. You're talking thousands and thousands of gallons a minute of water to cool these. These things are huge and complex, but yet they need to get them done fast. There's a rush to be who's first in the market. So a lot of times the age-old, the T&M, model doesn't necessarily fit for that, but also the age-old EPC model might not fit either. So we've had some success with some hybrid contracting models, which allows us to get into some of the design and really define and de-risk the project through the early stages of design. And using some of those technologies I talked about earlier, 3D, 4D, 5D, integrated design processes, using that to really come up with some truthful scope and fence around something much earlier in the project such that you can then apply a firm price to the rest of the project. So it's kind of an open book type philosophy to start with. Clients have a lot of input. They can have input into who we buy from and the risks associated and how we mitigate those risks, but then they can close the book at some point and kind of transition that risk to the EPC. That's worked pretty well for us on some projects with the right clients and the right size projects.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Just kind of wrapping up here on the, what's hot in engineering.
Sure.
If you had your crystal ball, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see the greatest opportunities for the engineering industry? And then second part of that question is talent available? I mean, do you have access to good talent?
So, where's the industry going? I believe, and I may be a bit biased because it's one of our visions, but the modular type approach. Modularization and applying that the new technology. People talk about AI. I mean, the AI we're going to use in engineering is going to be different from, ChatGPT and customer service and some of the other industries. Ours is going to be more about machine learning. I mean, we sit on a mountain of data, just a gold mine of data over just us ourselves, 30 plus years in business, people coming from other industries, other areas. How do you take that data and use technology to give you a launching pad for projects, for, figuring out how to make a new technology work? I mean, we do work with zero emission steel production and zero emissions cement production and turning corn into aviation fuel and all of these technologies that they've been proven at a lab scale, bench scale, but how do you scale them up to full production? And, technology is available to help us do some of that and help some of these move ahead faster. So I think integrating that technology and then, very large commercial projects, big, huge EPCs have been using a lot of these advanced technologies for a long time in the modular concept, but it hasn't really caught on to the scale of what we do. The mid-sized projects, the $500 million to $1 billion total installed cost projects. That's an area that I'm really interested in, is how do we apply what we've seen? Because these heavy industrial projects we do, on average, they suffer anywhere from 15 to 20% cost overruns, a lot of them 50% sometimes. And a lot of that's because they're complex. There's not a lot of consideration for the risks up front, and they're not utilizing the efficiencies of work that had been done in the past, or modular concepts in some cases. So we feel like we can really bring a solution that helps to carve away at some of those challenges in our industry.
Yeah, fantastic, bud. I mean, that's, it's one of those things where every project can't be a one-off, right?
Right.
Even if it's different in type, size, and location, but how do you glean those lessons learned? Now, I'm thinking about AI is could you have AI experts, right? And basically, this is the type, this is the size and location of the project. What can we go back into, and like you said, just in your own organization, you don't need anyone else's data. Just what have we learned 30 years, as you said at Samuels? What have we learned? How can we just glean that information from our own data? Really, I think that's awesome. Josh, let's spend a couple seconds here and talk about leadership's lessons learned. So what is the biggest leadership lesson you've learned that helps you weather any storm, no matter what that storm, business storm, political storm,
Yeah.
you mentioned COVID. What are your lessons learned, and how do you help
Oh
weather those
man,
storms?
this one's kind of cheesy, but I tell people act like a duck. Yeah, seriously, I actually have a picture in my office. It's not back here; it's over there. But of a duck on a pond. But if you think about a duck, you hear the old saying like "water off a duck's back," right? I mean, you have to do that as a leader. If you listen to the noise and you allow yourself to be distracted by all the noise, you are not going to have any luck as a leader. You can't let the small things get to you. Another lesson from ducks is you watch them fly and they fly in a V formation, right? That's not by accident. I mean, it's them working as a team, reducing air resistance, so that they can fly longer. They say they can fly 70% longer than if they were flying solo. Each person has a job to do on a leadership team and they help each other out. They work as a team so that they move forward together. And the last one is the picture I have of a duck. You picture a duck in a serene pond. And man, they just look so majestic, just gliding along like they're not even working hard. But if you had a camera underwater, you would just see their little feet just moving so fast, working so hard. But above water, it looks like they're just cruising along. And that was actually one of the best pieces of advice somebody gave me a long time ago when they told me about this be a duck. Is, don't let people see you freaking out about things. Remain calm. You got to remain calm as a leader. You don't want your team starting to react off of, what you're doing. And you can be working hard as possible below the scenes and, through a stressful situation, but be calm and graceful above the water where people see you and they'll follow you and they'll follow that calm.
It's just fantastic insights, and the one thing that I hear through that message is don't manage by the last bit of information you heard.
Oh,
And
man.
you've
I
seen
know.
way too many people doing that, so
Oh.
that's great insight. Josh, you're well into your career and you've had great success. What are you most proud of at this point? Like what are you most proud of in engineering and or projects or leadership? What's that one thing that sticks out for you?
As I look back, it's probably longevity. It's probably how long I've been here. I described, going to engineering school and all that. I took a really roundabout way of getting to where I am today, though. Finding out what I was meant to do in my life, and it actually found me. When I graduated from engineering school, I actually became a firefighter, and I was going to go to medical school, and I started going down that path. And at the time, my roommate worked at Samuel Engineering, and he said, "Hey, why don't you just try to use your degree, before you decide what you're going to do?" And sure enough, I did. I mean, just kind of the job found me and I've been able to build up since then. I came in project controls, actually, started in project controls, worked my way up different engineering groups and project engineering, project management, project development, and then into what I'm doing now. But I've had a lot of opportunities to leave along the way. A lot of, shiny objects dangled in front of me, tempted by money or high profile titles that didn't really mean anything. But something kind of kept me from taking that bait. I don't know what it was over time, but something really kept me believing in what I was doing, something bigger than myself, if you will. And I think that being able to, kind of latch onto that long game, that longevity principle has helped me and it helps me as a leader because it's really the true vision of our company. Everything we do is based around that, the fact that we want to be in business for hundreds of years. I want my son to be able to come work here. I want his kids to be able to come work here someday. And, that really drives a lot of the decision making that we do.
I think that's fantastic and just great insights. Josh, as you mentioned, the longevity. What
Yeah.
what advice could you give the next generation of engineers, leaders? What would that advice be today?
I tell a lot of the young people we bring in, never stop learning. Just because you just finished college doesn't mean you're done learning. You're done being forced to learn, but always have a knack for wanting to learn. Albert Einstein, obviously, all of us nerdy engineers love, guys like Albert Einstein, but he once said, wisdom's not a product of schooling. It's a lifelong attempt to acquire it, right? And always try to acquire that wisdom. Always try to be learning, especially in our industry. I tell new engineers, new designers, new professionals, go to a construction site. Any chance you get, go and see what it looks like to actually take what you've done and implement it into the real world and see how it works. Go to conferences, go to lunch and learns, ask questions. It's funny. We always joke about, back in the day before internet and stuff, you take notes. You'd be in a meeting and somebody would say something, you don't know what it is, and you jot it down. And my boss always says they would, they would rush to the library or whatever and go find it out. We would rush and, go back to our office and pull up the internet and pull it up. I mean, nowadays you can just be in a meeting and pull up Chat GPT or pull up the internet and, find out what something means. So take notes and pay attention, actively listen to what people are saying, because you'll learn so much that way.
Josh, that is, tremendous insights. And I want to just stop and just thank you. Thank you for not only your partnership in business, but your insights today. Truly inspiring to hear how strong leadership, culture, innovation, talked a lot about modular. That's just so exciting. Can really weather any storm, right? You've got to be able to adapt and change and lead. And just thank you so much, man. It's been a great conversation. Josh, any final thoughts here as we kind of wrap the show up?
Oh, no, Andy, I appreciate you having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. These are things that I'm really passionate about and can talk for hours about probably. But no, I'm excited for what's to come. The type of work that we do, we're in a prime position to really bridge the gap between all of the noise out there about different things going on, but everybody still wants to be able to live their life the way it is, drive their cars, plug in their phone, do, data centers, all this data needed. I kind of feel like I'm excited about the opportunity to bridge the gap between those two things and what we can bring in the future.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And Josh, thanks again, man. We'll have you on a future episode. And to our audience, thank you all for joining this episode of True Talks. Please continue this conversation on our social channels. If you have any insights that you'd like to share, we always love to see the feedback from these episodes. And Josh, listen, here in the United States, we'll be approaching Labor Day weekend. I hope you have a great weekend with your family. Be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too, Andy. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.